Okay, so welcome everyone to this evening's mixed media painting. This is the mixed media bird's nest. As you see in the chat, we're going to be using basic colored pencils, basic watercolor paints. We're going to do some flicking of paint. So you do want to make sure that your area is covered as best you can. But that's towards the end. So you'll have time. I'll give you time to, if you want to gather some newspaper or, what have you. But first, we are going to be starting out with the drawing. So you're going to need your pencil. We're also using the paper in landscape mode. And I'm going to move this up a little bit. And I always like to remind everybody to draw lightly. I always just draw darker since it needs to show up on Zoom. So we want to find out, or not find out, we want to draw in the middle of our paper here. So I'm just making sure that you guys can see everything I'm doing. There we go. So we're going to draw a circle, and then we're going to draw our eggs. From there, what we're going to do is we're going to start in with some of our colored pencils, and then we're going to use very light washes of watercolor on the nest. So what I'm talking about is after we draw the eggs, we're going to add some very light washes. And basically what happens is we wait for that to dry, and then we go over it again in colored pencil. So I'm just going to show this up close just so you can see. There are light washes underneath this. And then I've done both where I've done colored pencil on the bottom and then also colored pencil after it dries. The middle is also watercolor and colored pencil. This is actually black and brown. And then same with the eggs. I have a little bit of shading there using the sky blue. So just wanted to kind of go over that with you. So like I said, we are going to start in the center. We're going to be drawing a circle with our eggs. So, and if you want, actually, let's start off with our eggs. That's a little easier. So just trying to get in the center. And we'll start off with the first egg here on the left. I got to draw darker. There we go. Now, if you want to do more than 3 eggs, you are welcome to do that. If you want them to be even bigger than mine are, you are also welcome to do that. You can switch it up. I always say with my classes, please feel free to be creative. You can follow along and do exactly as I'm doing, but you can also have the freedom to, add your own touch to it. So we've got some ovals here for the eggs. Almost an oval here. That's better. And then we've got our bottom one here. I made that one a little bigger. Feel free to change up the sizes as well if you want. Okay, so you should have something that looks like that in the middle of your paper. Just checking in on everybody. So good to see everybody. It sure is getting cold out there. These are the months it's really good to turn off the TV and do some art. Okay, so next, now we're going to create our circle. Basically, the circle that goes around the eggs. So we kind of want the center of our nest. Sorry about that. I think somebody tried to call my phone. I use my phone as my document camera. And the last time I checked, there used to be a setting where you could actually put it right to voicemail. So I'll have to double check that. So I apologize for the interruption if it made the picture go away. And you don't have to have the nest be perfectly circle or circular or round. It is a nest. And it can be a little bit more less of a circle if you like. But that is actually all of the drawing that we do. And so now you want to just make sure that your lines are the way you want them. I'm just cleaning up my lines a little bit because I'm very sketchy when I draw. And since we're using watercolor, it will show through. Okay, so we are going to start first with some yellow. So we're going to start with our colored pencils. We're starting around the nest first, and we're going to be creating using the side or sides of our colored pencils. So kind of holding it like this. And we're going to be going around. I kind of started one a while back just so you could see. So you can see that there is a wash of colors around here using the watercolor. And then we also start to go around. Actually, I'm going to use my brown so that shows up more. You're going to be going around and using the side almost like you are kind of using a crayon. You can also, make thin lines like this as well. So kind of using it two ways, like so. And you're going to just be going around and creating a nest just like this, making your lines go in and out, just like twigs, using brown, yellow. I've got two different kinds of browns and I've got some black. So we're going to start off doing some of the colored pencil first. So, and actually, let's start off with our brown. So I'm going to move this over and put the original back up. So let's grab a brown colored pencil. And the one that I'm using is actually light brown. It's Crayola. If you don't have light brown, regular brown is fine because we are going to be adding that as well. I'm going to give you guys a little more light here. Okay, so using our brown colored pencil, we're going to go outside of the circle because we're going to be creating those lines. Actually, I think less light is better. And so we're going around, kind of crisscrossing our lines at first to resemble twigs. So we're doing this with the brown. And you're going to keep going around, making it a little bigger. And it's up to you how large you want your nest. You can also kind of backtrack and kind of go in, coming from the outside. And you want to have sort of a basic shape of what your nest is going to look like. You can still expand on it later on. As you see, I've got some other watercolor twigs right there. And I like to switch it up now and add some yellow. Now, again, we're going to be adding this once again, once everything is dry, because we're going to go over this using our watercolor. And then what we're going to do while that's drying, we're going to be creating the eggs. So add some yellow there. And you can add some black. I like to kind of switch in between, making sure that it doesn't get too dark yet with the black. So I'm going to go back to my brown, and feel free to kind of bend some of your twigs like so. So you should have something that resembles a little bit of craziness going around the nest. And once you're satisfied with some of the color, actually, I'm going to add a little more yellow here going around it. And for the watercolor part, you want to technically have two brushes, a size 6 or so, which is sort of a larger round brush, and then a smaller detail brush. If you don't have one or the other, it's okay to just use either the detail brush or the larger brush. Um, Basically, the larger brush just covers a larger area. You can still use a detail brush, but it's best for them to be round. So the tips should be round rather than flat. Again, if you only have a flat brush, that we can work with it. We can work with a flat brush too. But you want to make sure to have quite a bit of some colored pencil happening around your nest. You still want to be able to see around it, because that's what we're going to be using the watercolor for. And like I mentioned, we're also going to be adding some more on the top. So when you're happy with that, we are going to be getting into the following watercolor colors. We're going to be using yellow and orange mixed together to make like a golden orange or golden yellow. If you have those colors already pre-mixed, depending on which watercolor set you're using, you can use those. I'm using a basic Crayola set with, the rainbow colors. So I mix my own colors. But this, again, the colors yellow, orange, brown, black. and like a turquoise blue. If you don't have like a turquoise, it's okay. You can use the blue that you have. Um, and that's going to be for the eggs, obviously. We're also going to be using black for around the center of the nest, and also for some of the shading and the sort of splattering that happens. So I'll go over that again. We're going to start off with some yellow first, and we're doing very light washes. We want to make sure this dries so that we can go back in with our colored pencils. And it takes, quite a few minutes for it to dry so that the wax from the colored pencils will lay on top of it. So water or watercolor paper has to be dry. So let's start off, and we're going to start to create a wash right on top of your nest. So I'm adding some yellow right now, just on top of everything, going around. So we're working on the actual twigs part right now. We haven't done anything inside. That's going to be more colored pencil. So adding some yellow. And again, just kind of some light washes. You can start to add some orange in here as well, and brown. The other thing you can start to do, besides laying the color right on top, you can also start to make twigs that are coming out of the nest, like so. Let me see if you can see that. I'm just going to go on my speaker view here. Yeah, let me hold it up. So because I did it in orange, you can't really see it. So what I started doing was taking some of my orange and creating some sort of watercolor washed out twigs. I'm also going to do that with a very light black. My black in Crayola comes out more of like a grayish blue. So if you have a grayish blue color, that would work really well. So here's my blue. I'm coming in here and creating some of those twigs as well. So again, the colors you're using are brown, yellow, and maybe some orange mixed in with yellow, maybe orange mixed in with brown, obviously different colors that you would find in nature. And you can do both a wash, meaning a flat color, and then also on top using sort of the line method where you're taking the color and almost drawing with your brush. Add some more yellow in here. So remember, we're going to be going back on top using colored pencil. So if it doesn't look like it's filled in enough to you, just a reminder that we're also going to be using colored pencil to create more texture. I'm going to start adding some more black now. Slowly building up that color. You know, you can do a little bit of a wash with different colors as well. You know, it's almost wreath-like. So you can kind of add different lines of color, nature inspired, of course. I'm not sure if a blue nest would look as realistic, but some more brown. So you should start to have something that looks a little bit like this. And it might look a little more yellowed to you, depending on the colors you're using. I might add a little more brown around here. Well, you can make your lines thicker or thinner depending on how high you hold your brush. You can also go back and forth if you're using two brushes. You can go back and forth between, your larger brush and your, finer tipped brush. That'll also make a difference in um, your sort of nest area. But we also now want to start in with our eggs. So you can, come back to your nest as far as with the colored pencil. But anything that you want to do as far as a wash right now, probably best to do it now. Because if not, it won't dry in time in order to apply the colored pencil. So I'm going to put one more wash around here before I call it done with the watercolors, at least for the nest area. And then I like to start off and make sure that my pencil for my eggs is very light. So when you're ready, you want to, erase as much as possible the lines that you've drawn for the eggs, because the pencil does show through. And in some drawings, that's okay. And if you want it to show through, that's okay too, because the other thing is we are going to be going over it with colored pencil. So not too much of a big deal, but we want to start off and make sure that we do some shading on the egg or all the eggs. So starting off with, a little more of a darker color sort of around the edges of the egg. And then just like if you were shading with a pencil, you would go very light, but instead we're going to take our water and take the color from around the edge of the egg and then start to bring it towards the center so that we start to get lighter colors just by using water. You can also leave the white of the paper on parts of the egg. So there's my first egg so far. I'm going to continue doing that. It's kind of a delicate process. And, just take your time with it. I'm using my bigger brush, but feel free if you have both brushes, um, use whichever one you feel more comfortable with doing the eggs. It might be your smaller brush. And then we're going to go back, we're going to add some grayish, or in my case, the black from Crayola because it looks grayish. Okay. And the third egg here. Now again, we're going to go back and add another color. You could also add some purple to this if you wanted, or some brown. But I stuck with basic colors of the blue and then a little bit of, like I mentioned, I use black to make it a little more gray-like. So if you have gray, you can use that. And again, I'm just pushing a little bit of the water and the color inward, coming outward from where I added a lot of the color around the edges. And in order to get the shading, I just very gently push it outward, adding water, obviously, but not a lot of water. Go easy with the water at first. Because if it dilutes it too much, it might kind of run. You can always go back and add more water. But it's harder to control it if you've used too much water to begin with in an area where it kind of starts to run amok. Oh, I haven't used that word in a long time. Oh, yes. So the size of the brush, the brown handle, this one is actually a 12, but all of them are different, unfortunately, depending on the maker of the brushes. They're all different. So this is technically a size 6. Um, in one of my other brushes, but I couldn't find where it was, so I picked this one up. Yes. Yeah, so it's about a size 6. It's a thicker brush. And then this one, see, the funny thing is, this one is also a size 6, but as you can see, they're completely different and they're different companies. It's really crazy that the companies, um, kind of have their own sizing, almost like clothing manufacturers, right? A size 8 is not an 8 in another brand. It's very confusing. So I would say a size 2 or so as a smaller brush, even though, like I said, mine says both of them say a 6 on the ones I'm using, but like a 6-ish and a 2-ish. You're welcome. And so, same, Lisa. I know. So crazy, the clothing manufacturers, it's like, oh man. Yeah. And so when you are ready to put on the darker shade on the egg, you can do that. And I'm going to go in a little bit closer now, just so you can see the detail. So I'm going to move down the original. So I've started to add in a little bit of gray, which, as I mentioned, is really black in Crayola, but it's like this gray, it's kind of nice. It's just that when you're trying to get black, it's not as nice. And so just going very gently and little by little, adding shading, as you can see, to each egg. So there's one. We're going to go to the next one here. Watercolor is all about the water control, um, and layers, very light layers. If you go too thick at first, um, it kind of ruins the paper and also the effect that you want to achieve. So think of it as the water is almost like an eraser, um, or like the color white makes everything lighter, which is why it's really neat to be able to, add different layers on, very different than acrylic or oil. Okay, so building up little by little. And maybe even going back and adding a little more blue. And just taking your time and having fun in the process. Okay. And then once you have that done, now you don't have to be done with the eggs, just saying when you feel satisfied as far as the coloring, you then want to bounce your painting because we now want it to dry enough so that we can start adding layers of our colored pencils. So again, just take your time. The next step will be we'll be adding colored pencils. And then our last step is we're going to be flicking, usually like I use the black. You can use gray. Um, and, you might want to add a few things around the edges of your nest when you're finished as well. But for right now, when you've finished with the eggs, at least with the shading, you want to just kind of dry your drawing. So if you don't have a hair dryer, I just always bounce it up and down. Now that it's, getting to be winter, a lot of us have that, inside our homes, it's drier, so it makes paint dry quicker. That's a both fortunate thing and sometimes unfortunate thing. I feel like mine is pretty dry. Basically, what we want is we want the nest to be the driest at this point, because that's what we're going to be, doing as far as having the colored pencil. I'm just going to flip it over to see. That's getting pretty dry. Oh, you want to take about 5 minutes to dry your painting. Now is also a good time if you want to get something to drink or use the lavatory or stretch your fingers. Now's a good time to do that too. I love it. Donna had her hair dryer right beside her. Nice job. I know. I actually have a hair dryer for just watercolor. I mean, it's not a special one or anything. It's just a smaller one that it's kind of like one of those travel ones. And I think I'm pretty sure it's from like the 1980s. And you can tell if it's dry by kind of rotating your paper around. Of course, you want the fibers to be really dry, depending on, if you can kind of test out one of your colored pencils. And sometimes it kind of slides on top of the watercolor. So you may have to press a little bit. But we can also start to do the center part while, if yours is still drying around the edge. So if you are ready, we can do the center part around the eggs. We use yellow, brown, and black. You can use different colors of brown. You can just use regular brown, depending on how light you want it. But I start off and take the yellow using the side of it and, just start to color it in. Color in all around the eggs using yellow. It doesn't have to be solid. You don't want it solid because what we want is we're trying to mimic the different colors, the different kinds of hay or twigs or fuzz, whatever, is in the bird's nest. I'm sure we've seen it. A lot of you have seen like real bird's nests before. They're really fascinating. I've seen ones where it's almost like it looks like wool or fuzz. And I'm thinking it's probably animal feathers, maybe. I don't know. Very interesting. Oops. So I just took a little bit of yellow. You might be able to see that it's a little more golden colored. Let's see if I can shine that on there. Just looks a little bit golden. And then we can start to layer with some browns. And you want to kind of go around, much like we were doing around the outside, creating sort of lines of twigs, like so, but in a circular fashion. And then we'll get darker once we get in between the eggs. So now I'm actually starting to do a little bit of coloring around the eggs. We're also going to be going back and just using our colored pencils for some more shading, final shading on our eggs as well. Now, if you also find that, you go around with your hand and you can feel that your paper is pretty dry in this section, that's when you're going to start to kind of go around also and start to create lines of twigs using your colored pencils. But we're really focusing on the center for right now. And again, using brown, I'm using a lighter brown. I'm going to start adding the darker brown. So that was my light brown. I'm now going to go in with the dark brown, and you can see a difference. And again, starting to sort of shade it using the side, but then also creating these lines to make them look twig-like. So it's okay if you don't stay in your inner circle here. You can also, branch out. And this is where you really want to start coloring. Again, where the eggs are almost touching in the center, is you want it to be a little darker in the center of the nest. We're building up that color using brown and then black. I also use a little bit of blue, the sky blue, or light blue, or regular blue. But we haven't added that yet. We're just adding the browns on top of the yellow. So your nest should start to look like it's getting more nest-like. I'm going to grab a little bit of blue and just kind of quickly cover the area around the eggs. So in the nest part, using the side of the colored pencil. just giving it sort of a blue undertone. You can do this with purple. You can do this with, regular blue. Doesn't have to be a light blue. And it's just kind of a wash of, light shading on top of the brown and the yellow that we just did. So you're going to get kind of a greenish, you might get like a greenish tint a little bit, along with having the blue. And it's just really a quick, sort of a quick shading with that blue. And then we're really going to start to make it a lot darker by pressing especially around our eggs. So after we lay in that blue, we're now going to take our brown and trace around each of our eggs. This is using brown. So I'm getting a lot darker now. And once your eggs are outlined in your brown, you're then really going to start pressing. You should be able at this point to start using your colored pencils in that area. I mean, you're still able to use the colored pencils in this area, and then you should be able to on the surrounding area, but we're not going there yet. We're still sticking to the area right up against the eggs. And this is where we really want to start pressing on our colored pencils and making it darker. At first using the brown, and then we're going to add in black on top of it. So you can kind of go around like this, kind of in circles, again, recreating that texture of twigs and a nest. You can even start to, we're kind of going around in swirls, but you can break it up. I actually have to start sharpening my brown, which will probably happen to you too because we're using such textured paper. Oops. And again, you can use both the side, almost like you're using charcoal. And you can also use it straight on, like this. And you can also start to create some more twigs that are kind of sticking out of your nest, like so. Using brown. You can add in some black, but we're going to start adding in black in the center. So you can see what a difference that's starting to do, making it darker. That's why you want to add the brown first, because the black kind of, overtakes the color. And you want the other colors to kind of shine through. But you can retrace around the eggs again using your black. And we'll start to shade. Again, just like we did with the brown. But you can go back and forth between using black, brown. You can even start to add in some yellow before you actually mix up your brown and your black. If you haven't covered those spots completely yet with the darker colors, I like to kind of go back and add a little more yellow before I finish off with the brown and the black. Just kind of a little bit of just a little bit. And then I'm going back in with brown. So again, going back and forth between brown and black. And then back to black. And you can go back and use your brown on top of the black as well to kind of lighten it a bit. And I do that in the final stage, just again, so that there's sort of a litany of colors that are happening. You can still see, I'm going to show that up close. You can still kind of see, the colors underneath. I mean, I'm still not finished with it, but the whole idea is to kind of have some of the other colors that we put down first shine through a little bit. Just take your time as you're adding the colors. Because the paper is bumpy, you're going to find you definitely have to apply some pressure in order to get it to be a little darker. But it also has a really nice texture. I actually like using watercolor paper for colored pencils sometimes, because it creates a nice texture if that's what you're looking for. And so again, the other thing that you can start doing with your colored pencils, if you want to start working outward, making, using your black to go on top of your nest and kind of creating these spots of kind of dark, as you're rubbing, kind of coloring in sections like this, going around. You can even start to get a little crazy and, go around in a little bit of circles on top of what you've already done, but using those lines, like breaking it up like we were doing with the watercolor, fragmented lines on top. You can make some of the lines bend. You can do the same with the brown. I'm still not done with making it really dark in the middle, but I thought wanted to kind of show you here, what's possible with your line work. Back and make it even darker in the middle here. Might add a little more blue. Adding some blue on top of the dark is kind of nice. Just gonna kind of show a section right there, just like right there. It kind of gives it a nice element. You want to get darker, especially where the eggs meet, kind of in the middle here, sort of this sort of triangular area. So you want to get a little darker with your colored pencils. And you can, again, take your black and your brown and kind of make some sort of shaded parts, like scribbles almost, which is what I'm doing here. Make it kind of look like stuff is in the twigs. And then even as you're shading, the dark part, at this stage, you can start to, almost kind of scribble a bit to make it look like, the twigs are on top of each other. Coming from the center. Even add a little bit of blue colored pencil in my nest and the surrounding, just a little bit, not too much. You really want to make sure to get some nice darks where the eggs are. And when you're ready, you can go and add just a little bit of shading using your blue on top of the eggs. I do it mainly um, kind of around the parts that have the most color. And you don't have to. This is just another step for the shading. Gives it a little bit of texture. I'm just going to kind of show that one egg. Just a little bit of texture around there. Again, you don't have to. And we're gearing up for our last part, which is the flicking. And this is where, you know, when you're ready, you want to make sure that you don't get it on anything important. If that's a concern to you. Since this is kind of my art room, I've got splatters on my computer. I've got splatters on other things. So I try not to get too crazy, but so what we want to do with this now is we want to use, like I mentioned, either a gray, a black. We can also use brown. We can use combinations of all of those colors. But I like to start off using my black. So I'm going to take my bigger brush and make sure it's nice and wet. And I'm going to go into my black. I also sometimes like to mix my black and my blue to get a little more of a grayish. You can kind of see that there. And then I'm going to hold my brush over top and I'm going to take my fingers and start to hit. And it's going to splatter. So again, you've got to use a lot of paint and a lot of water. So I'm just tapping around. To make it a little lighter, you can dip in more water. I'm going to do it again using more water so that now I get a lighter gray. Give everybody a minute or so. I can't wait to see what everybody's looks like. So I'm going to remove my spotlight here. And I will also stop the recording. Oops.